World's Worst Murder Detective. By Adam Stark. Chapter 1. Harvard Taught Me Something. Hello. My name is Powen Yootipopper. I am writing this book to tell you all my story. Basically, I graduated Harvard University with honors and I ended up in prison. I'm not really upset though, it's actually the best place for me. Boy oh boy do I have fun here. I recommend all detectives from Harvard give prison a try. Anyways, I hope that my story can help people to learn from my mistakes, or at least one of those mistakes. So, I have always had one amazing gift of a photographic memory. I like to think of it as more of a videographic memory. I truly did graduate Harvard University with honors, that is not an exaggeration folks. See, here's my problem. My curse if you will. I have the worst kind of hearing problem in the entire universe of living organisms. It's not just bad enough that I can't hear very well, but I do this crazy thing as I'm listening. I take what information that I simply believe that I am hearing, and no matter what it is, I do it. For example, I actually did that when I started writing this book, if you can believe that. I was offered a deal to write this book about my story. So I started writing the following. Well, I was born in a small town. My father was a milk salesman and a cattle farmer. My mother was a butcher. I first encountered puberty when I was filing my taxes, and just like that I was interrupted as my papers were scrunched up and thrown away. I was yelled at and told that they weren't implying for me to write my life story for the book, but obviously just to write about the story that landed me in prison. So my ears kept up the tradition, having horrible hearing and comprehension. The people offering me the book deal told me that I was very stupid and a real piece of work. I informed them that I am unemployed. They then proceeded to tell me what the definition of being a piece of work means, and I subsequently agreed to their insult about my stupidity. So now they decided to pay me a visit in prison before I receive my payment for this book. You know what they wanted to tell me? I don't believe for a nanosecond that you ever even attended Harvard. I'm going to give you a verbal exam and let's see if you can pass this test, you dumb shit. I was perplexed. I looked this man straight in the eyes and told him, my degree isn't enough for you? Fine, gimme your test, bring it. So he puts his hand on his hip, scratches his ass and asks me, question 1. What is the population of Madrid? I squinted my eyes in embarrassment and whispered, a number. He grinded his teeth and looked at his assistant in the room, and he wrote something down on his clipboard. He puts his hand on his eye in shame, the same hand he scratched his ass with. I had to laugh at that, and then I played it off as if I was just coughing. So he blurts out, question 2, what is the capital of Italy? I looked at him with the hands up in the air on each side, showing my confusion accompanying this test, and said, a city. Are you kidding me right now? Give me a break. You know what, skip to the most difficult question. I'm not scared, let's go. He throws his pen at the wall and told me, fine. Fine, you know what, let's show this joker. Forget the rules, let's just kill him with this one. How do you break down the isotopes of uranium-235? I pounded my fist on the table and yelled, you are disgusting. What a farce of an exam. Shame on you guys, I went to law school. So you really think I would know the answer to this? I'm not a chemist? Ugh, fine. Uranium-235 has an atomic mass of 92 isotopes and must be broken down through the process of nuclear fission with a free slow-moving neutron, therefore removing the aforementioned isotopes by reacting with particles inexorably releasing kinetic energy through enigmatic nature. I mean, seriously guys. So they had a moment of silence, and the guy who was in the back picked up his phone. He talked for a few seconds and he informed his partner that my degree was legitimate, proving I was indeed a Harvard honors graduate. As they were about to leave the room, I vented my frustration even more. Because they didn't believe my achievements, but mostly because I wanted to delay going back to my prison cell as much as possible. So I hollered, I told you so. I never lied about a damn thing. Blow these nuts. Boy, did it just light a fuse in them. One rushed me and shoved me harshly down on the chair and uttered, "Look, shitbait, write your stupid fucking book. You passed authorization, just make it a bestseller so we get more credit for sponsoring you. The way you handled screwing up is so horrible. I'm surprised no one has killed you, Powen." I thought of more stories of my past I could bring up to delay going back to my cell longer. I spoke of them saying, "Hey, you know what? Say what you want about my choices, but neither of you weasels will give me credit for whistleblowing." I had the biggest whistleblowing bombshell that should have ruined the schools and academies for good. Where's my credit for trying to do that? The two men just kept on chuckling to each other, so I decided to keep telling them about it. I dramatically vented to them. I found out a serious flaw in our grading structure. I am so shocked that after all these years, none of these institutions decided to admit it was flawed. Most people must be in on it, or simply incognizant to this information. I'm very disappointed at the ineptitude of our media not covering this finding. I discovered that on average, grades go as follows: every 10% is one letter grade. A, B, C, D. Then F. So D being 60 to 69% as a D grade, then leading to the F or fail grade is every number under 60%. So they omitted an entire letter in the English alphabet, the letter E. And if the letter E grade was in place, then the failing F grade would be 10% lower and harder to achieve. Therefore most students' averages would be much higher, like a C average student would look way more intelligent. The highest percentile of failing students receive an F grade, which is 50 to 59%, imagine if that was an E grade instead. And an F grade was 49%. This was amazing to me. Being an expert in semantics and computational linguistics, you'd think the news anchors would invite me for a full disclosure. But no. I wrote a letter about my discovery to the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Wanna know what they responded to me? These two men were laughing so hard at me I thought they were going to puke. I just felt like telling them even though I was getting nowhere. I said, the letter I received in return said, quote, "Mr. Yootipopper, please don't contact us again. Youreadumbass. And you know what bothered the ever-loving crap out of me? I am not an amphibian. I'm clearly a mammal. But they called me a bass of all things? Come on now, even if I was a fish I wouldn't be a bass. I'd be like a pike or something, like something with more gills. And, what really confused me along with all of the other erroneous elements to this bizarre letter, is the word dumb in it. Like, I'm not just a bass fish but a stupid one? Like, okay, excuse me Mr. FBI, but how in the fucking world do you know how to measure the intelligence of a fish? That was absurd, moronic, folly. They must have been writing that insipid diatribe ad nauseum. I wish they'd take the proper discourse to discover what species I am before lamenting my very being to something extremely unlikely. These guys laughed and slammed the door on me, leaving me in the room still. It took the prison guards a couple of hours to figure out that I was trapped in there. Damn, I just spent the whole first chapter without getting to my story. World's Worst Murder Detective. By Adam Stark. Chapter 2. Over Easy. It was the most exciting, exhilarating moment in my lifetime, my first case. I arrived at the scene of the crime as soon as humanly possible. This case had me very anxious because I just knew, at the time, that if I could solve my first case I would get some rep. The rep of being a great detective was the best feeling that I have ever known. Not even Harvard taught me that. This particular crime took place in a newspaper company. I won't say which one because I don't want to get sued. I took a quick look around the office and made an astute observation: it was a suicide. Clear as day, easiest possible case to solve. So as this story was being written about the victim, I wanted to get in on the action. Steal some of the notoriety from this situation. I asked the co-workers about the job and about the victim whom which I will secure his or her identity. They told me was a writer for the newspaper and I got so excited. I thought of an evil plan. I asked them if he went by an alias for his writer's name. Luck would have it yes he did. So I told the newspaper company to put my name in their article about it. I said to claim that this was a homicide. They were flabbergasted in astonishment. I explained to them that since he was a writer under an alias, and his real name was different, then by him killing himself leaving two names deceased that I'd argue it's more of a murder than a suicide. They didn't want to do it for me. I wanted my credit. No one is going to give a shit if I solve a suicide in 7 minutes. But if people see that I solved a murder in 7 minutes, I'll be looked at as one of the greatest detectives. That reasoning I explained to them did not help my plan one bit though. So I simply threatened them with a devious plot. I was going to make my own newspaper company, and call it the same name. The only difference is I would place a very small accent mark over one of the letters of the newspaper title, so that I'm not technically stealing their name. Then, I would hire a team of writers to write horrible dribble in every paragraph that no one would enjoy. And last but not least, deliver my fake imposter newspapers to all of the same residents as theirs. They would lose a fortune. It worked, they didn't budge. They gave me my warped version of what really happened and gave me my over-embellished credit. So that led me to my first real murder case which landed me here in prison. I felt so lucky. My first day on the job, I was just getting to meet the staff and there was an announcement of a murder. I was so happy. Already a murder? Already work to do on day one? I was jumping up and down, whistling tunes, blowing up balloons, and I even ordered a pizza. The staff had just met me, and every single one of them hated me with a real visceral hatred. My boss told me to just shut up and drive to the crime scene. I was sad I didn't get to eat any pizza before I left. My boss's name was John Kratzworth. He follows all the new detectives around on their first few cases. He scolded me while I was driving. I pretended that I didn't notice. He blurted out, "Do you ever use WD-40? I glanced at him for a moment and whispered, "I beg your pardon, boss?" He takes a deep breath and tells me, "Your door. It's so loud and squeaky." I was truly puzzled. I put my left arm on the window and asked him, "Sir, I'm not sure what exactly you propose tax forms would do to help my door's volume?" John covered his face and gasped. He looked back over and grunted, "Are you kidding me right now? You don't know WD-40 is? Wow. I'm regretting this already. Remember, you are only here because you're a Harvard honors graduate. But that doesn't mean I'm not watching you." Well, I heard this and it upset me. Although looking back I'm not sure what upset me more, pissing off my boss within the first 5 minutes or not knowing what the hell a WD-40 is. Either those were tax forms for sure. Anyways, I thought I would swallow my pride and try asking him something to stroke his ego and act like he's way above me. So I put some fingers on my chin and asked, "So, what is your best advice for new folks on the hunt? Something that will get me far in my career and field like yourself." He switched up his tone to a very serious one and told me, "Good, now you're thinking. The best thing I can tell you is you need to accept the fact that this is a job that you will take home with you. So study the cases on your free time and don't waste opportunities. Basically, make sure you're focused on the scene, and at the same time you're persistent off the scene." So I was happy that he seemed to be in a better mood because I let him ramble to feel smart. There was a problem. I opened my mouth. Big mistake. I unfortunately assured him, "That will not be a problem, boss. You never have to worry about that with me. I don't even have a purse." My boss rotated his entire body to look at me in disgust once again. He pointed at me to say, "What? I didn't say a thing about a damn purse. Were you even listening?" I quickly told him, Oh, I thought you said to make sure my purse is sent off the scene, because if I had a purse it would surely distract me from the task at hand. John yelled back at me, persistent. Wow, my lord. Seriously, tell me how in the halt of reality that you live in, did you manage to survive Harvard? I angrily yelled back, hey! I have a videographic memory. Most of my exams were on paper, most correspondences were from emails. When I read shit, I make no mistakes. When I have to use my ears, problems may come about. But rarely. Luckily that uncomfortable conversation came to an end because we just arrived to the crime scene. It was a sandwich shop and deli. One man on the ground, murdered. Police had the scene taped off with the yellow crime scene tape. The first thing the officer in charge told us was that there was also a theft. Money and food was stolen coinciding with the murder. So I stood back and astutely observed the entire crime scene slowly. Mr. Kratzworth introduced himself and spoke to the only worker in the building, the owner. His name was Samis Koldran. What I had gathered from my boss's discussion with him is that the victim was his friend, his co-worker, and his relative. Even knowing this information, I had been waiting my whole life to feel the exhilarating feeling of working a hardcore murder investigation. So what did I do with the owner? I decided to play hardball and come off strong right away. I walked up to him aggressively and got right up in his face. I yapped, hey, you listen here, you scumbag. You bag of scum. Give me a reason. Give me one reason why I shouldn't lock you up right now and swallow the key. Besides indigestion. I have to admit, the words didn't come out as well as it did when I rehearsed my banter in my head. Samis Koldran didn't even blink or move, he just looked right back at me and responded, because I didn't do anything. That's my close personal friend, you jackass. What a bunch of baloney. I opened up my eyes very wide and started walking backwards. I had a possible revelation. I walked over to my boss to share it. Mr. Kratzworth looked at me and whispered, what the fuck are you doing? That's not the way to get information. I put my hands out in front of me to symbolize how serious I was. I whispered back, sir, you know how in some murder cases the suspect will have a slip-up? An accidental admission of guilt. He turned his head to look the other way and looked back at me. He quietly said, yes. Where in the hell are you going with this? I swallowed my saliva in angst and told him, look, I accused him of being the killer. I put pressure on the dipshit in the hopes that soon his alibis will start slipping up down the road, or something like that. Anyways, so I very calmly accused him of being the killer, and I couldn't believe what I heard. It was a sound for sore ears. He actually admitted something crucial to prove he was involved. In his angry rebuttal to my claims about him, he literally said that it was quote a bunch of baloney and that he wouldn't have done it. I mean, boss, doesn't that say it all right there? How would he know that there was baloney at the crime scene unless he was there? That had to be a Freudian slip. My boss was so enraged that he actually crouched down and covered his face before answering me. He told me, okay, first of all, a bunch of baloney is an expression that means something is bullshit, or untrue. And second of all, he works here and owns the building. So he would be fully aware that there's sandwich meat like that here. And lastly, even I knew there was baloney here because this is a deli sandwich shop, for God's sake. There isn't a damn thing suspicious about him saying that. Your ideas are nothing but pure dribble and lunacy. At this point I began looking at the papers containing the inventory records. There was money, bread, dough and utensils stolen. My boss was on the phone, he was getting excited. When he hung up he instructed to me, hey, I might have a possible lead. Never waste one when you catch one. Whatever you do, don't let this killer slip through the cracks. I became euphoric. I gleefully responded, oh. So you think I am right? That Samis did commit the murder? I smiled at my boss, and subsequently he started frowning. He yelled back at me, "No. How would you conceive that stupid idea?" I then joined him in frowning and said, "You said to me, just now, don't let this killer slip through the cracks? So I thought you were agreeing with me because it's slippery on the sidewalk cracks outside. You and I aren't the killer obviously, so it would have to be the only other living person here at this bloody crime scene? No pun intended. But right? Come on now." My boss got so close to my throat, I thought he was gonna choke me. He sternly said to me, "How about this, shut up, and you better not cross the line again." So I did exactly what he instructed. However, that was the problem. My ears once again took his words too literally. I was completely silent, but when he was waiting for me at the car for 10 minutes he came back inside to find me doing nothing. He threw his hat at the wall. He ferociously yelled at me, "What the fuck are you doing? No one else is there. Can you not take a hint shit back?" I took a deep breath and explained to him saying, "Look, I'm simply following your instructions. You told me to shut up and I did that, no problem. Then you told me to make sure I don't cross that line, and as you can see, what are we surrounded by? Crime scene tape. And I didn't leave because that would be crossing a line, because the definition of a line according to Webster's dictionary is I couldn't even finish explaining myself before he dragged me out of the shop by my arm." World's Worst Murder Detective. By Adam Stark. Chapter 3. Clue Lesson Clue Did. Arriving back at the office was a wonderful feeling. No more smell of blood, no more creepy death feeling, and I could finally eat some of my pizza I ordered. But that good feeling didn't last too long, not long at all. I made yet another serious mistake. My boss showed me some of the evidence that he gathered so that we could both compare notes and analyze things as a cohesive unit. So he pulls out a paper and tells me, "Check this out, a princess." So I heard something else completely different. You see, he was showing me a paper from the victim's pocket which was a crayon drawing. It said a princess on it. Anyone with good hearing could understand that this was an indication that he had a daughter who made this drawing. The catastrophic problem here was the unfortunate way that Mr. Kratzworth worded it, as well as the way my cursed ears heard it. He actually said, "Check this out, a princess," when I mistaken him for saying, "Check out what the apron says." I left to go check out all of the aprons the crime scene. They were all blank, no words on them, except for one spot. The tags said "Made in China" on them. So, I'm very embarrassed to admit that I immediately booked a flight to China, because my ears thought that this is what my boss wanted me to do. It felt like I was following a lead, but I wasn't. So my phone was turned off on the entire flight to China because of the airline's rules. I'll tell you guys, believe you me, when I turned my phone back on it was making so much noise I thought it was going to explode. It was my boss yelling at me, demanding to know where I was. So I called him up. I didn't even get a chance to say one word. He overwhelmed me and hung up the phone. The call went something like this: "Hey, Powen, you get your bitch ass back to my office right now. Hurry up and get over here. I don't even wanna know where you are, just hurry. You better get here in 5 minutes or find a way to turn back time, you goddamn degenerate bitch." So I went straight back to the line at the airport to get another flight. I also purchased a very expensive laptop computer and I rented the Wi-Fi internet service for my flight. Why? So I could research how to turn back time. That's right, my ears once again took something too literal. I actually did find a way to time travel successfully though. I researched throughout the entire plane ride. I knew that I would face ridicule if my discovery didn't have a 100% success rate. I was eager to impress my boss, and go back in time far enough to prevent the murder from happening. When I finally arrived back to the good old USA, I drove to the office as fast as I could. My boss wanted a detailed explanation for my absence immediately. I changed the subject so that I wouldn't have to answer. I told him everything I found through my research, Mr. Kratzworth. I did it. I found a way to, wait, I mean we did it. My 11 hours of research is only half of the credit compared to your command to me to research. John Kratzworth cut me off without taking a breath to say, listen up. If this isn't something that's more important than the warrant for the new prime suspect in my hand, I am going to write you up a red letter so fast you'd think the post office was delivering on some motherfucking motorcycles. I abruptly told him, oh, it is. My news is great and better than that warrant you speak of, sir. I've officially discovered how to successfully time travel. And the method has a 100% rate of success that cannot fail. You see, if you measure the United States via the Dewey Decimal System, and calculate the time it would take to travel a distance from certain specified states adjacent to one another, and apply the Joule-Thomson effect, which incorporates a closed system where gas gets put in on one side. Now, in my astonishment, I made a monumental discovery, a complete change in our civilization, a change in the status quo, if you will. Underneath the Earth is the core, which I define as a geometrical progression of deadly mass, in which its curvature could skew the density of such measurements, is carefully calculated to my main point, which is, if you go from Idaho to Nevada, you will go back in time 1 hour. So we should go do that multiple times and then prevent the murder. He grabbed me by the collar and yelled, that's it. I am so sick of you getting us nowhere. I am convinced you were born without the genetic disposition to make an intelligent statement. What the hell, are you? Time travel isn't possible, dumb shit, that's called passing through a time zone. Who doesn't know that? When you were born, did your mother give you the pile driver on your head? I hastily responded saying, no, that's impossible. How dare you? He let go of my shirt and pushed me. He said, no, trust me. It is impossible, your research was hogshit. I gotta admit that really pissed me off. Not for the reason you'd expect though. I wasn't mad at him debunking my 11-hour research project, but mad that he thought I was saying my research conclusion for time travel was impossible. No, I was actually only mad that he said my mother would do a pile driver maneuver on me. At any rate, I angrily told him, not that, the other thing you said, my mother would never, she never had a driver's license, you jerk. My boss grabbed my head and physically turned it towards the exit and told me, get out of my sight. And take this suspect's profile, make yourself useful and go dig up dirt on this guy. No one can find him. World's Worst Murder Detective. By Adam Stark. Chapter 4. Asshole Assailant. Of all the places in the world, where was I sent to? The spooky fucking cemetery of all places. Or maybe I should just be honest, my ears misunderstood. When my boss told me, quote, dig up dirt on this guy, I gotta tell you people reading this, that is some jargon that I have never heard before. I thought that checking the tombstones with the matching names would get me some dirt for my boss. I looked at every single cemetery in the city that night. No results. I also used up the company car's gas, which I'm sure pissed everyone off even more. So I want to run this by you guys, because I honestly think that I did the right thing, but my boss strongly disagrees. I had a conversation with him before that I was hesitant to mention in my recollection. As usual, it did not go well. It went like this. I bothered him during lunch and said, Mr. Kratzworth, I am convinced that it was Sami's cauldron. Allow me to extend an olive branch and explain. I remember in my Harvard studies, the psychological profile of serial killers. One of the things they do is learn their victims' work schedule and patterns. Another thing they do is return to the scene of the crime. And lastly, they might be so disturbed that they find themselves going to their victim's funeral. All of which, he did. That cannot possibly just be a coincidence. Mr. Kratzworth looked at me and scoffed. He told me, okay, once again, wrong. It is not a coincidence that he returns to the crime scene, he works there and owns the joint. It's not weird that he knows the victim's work schedule. He is the boss. He makes the damn schedule. And last but certainly not least, the victim was his friend, his relative, his co-worker, so I'm not in the least bit surprised that he went to the funeral. Why would that shock you? I don't know, I think common sense is pejorative to the disease between your ears. I left the cemetery and went with my instinct. I gave Sami's cauldron a visit. I had to keep this a secret so that my boss wouldn't destroy me during our next confrontation. I knocked on Sami's door. He answered. He was very cooperative. I turned up the intensity and yelled at him, "All right, punk. No more pleasantries. What is your alibi for the date of the murder? I'm convinced you did it. Convince me otherwise or I'll convince a judge." He didn't even take a second to think and calmly responded, "At that time in the early morning I was sleeping, sir." I pounded on the table and pretended it didn't hurt. I screamed at him saying, "Oh wonderful. The way I see it, only a sick killer could kill someone and then comfortably sleep that same night. What are you, an emotionless alien freak?" He shrugged his shoulders and repeated his last response. I looked at the wall and all of the damn sudden, I freaked out. I thought about a terrible problem that I had. I realized that I as well had no alibi for that night. I was so scared, I hastily told him, Stop, please, I just realized something. I don't have an alibi either for that time. I was sleeping too. You and me are tied. How about we make a deal? I won't arrest you, if you don't put me under citizen's arrest. I'll leave you alone, you leave me alone, okay?" He smiled, he stood right up and marched over to hold the door open. I left. I felt utterly defeated. I was glad that this was kept a secret. But I wasn't glad for long because he complained to the department and my boss yelled at me the next morning about it. He wrote me up. Mr. Kratzworth asked me what leads did I follow that took me 6 hours. This was another embarrassing fail on my part. I told him that I was following some leads for the case. He yelled at me and reminded me that we now have a warrant for an arrest of the new prime suspect. He wanted to know about the cemetery and explained to me what dig up dirt on someone means. Find records and credit cards, interests, accomplices, etc. He asked me what leads I had found. I told him the truth, nothing. I was hoping he would just be mad at that, but I wasn't that lucky. He was furious that I found nothing, but yet he still asked me where I was for 6 hours. I scarcely told him this, "Sir, I was listening to my tape recorder of my notes that I've taken throughout the case. Only the notes about the case, of course, not the other." Never mind. Anyways, one of the notes I listened to from my earlier recordings was my mention of the robbery motive. The killer stole bread and dough from the sandwich shop, sir. Now, bread and dough are slang for money in the streets. The street slang is used to hide motives, right? So I heard my voice recorded note saying, quote, "There's some dirty laundering to acknowledge," and yeah, I do believe that there was some dirty money laundering. 100%, sir. But the problem is that I heard my own voice wrong. I thought that my voice, after annotating over my voice again, had said, quote, "There's some dirty laundry in college," so with that I went back to Harvard. I searched all 5 hours and 45 minutes in the dirty laundry rooms and found nothing. My ears strike again, sir. My boss screeched at me, "This case is cold because of you. You must be very proud of yourself." I was annoyed and said, "The notion that my actions made this case cold is absurd, incongruous. The case is cold because the files are in my freezer. Come on now, what the hell, with the apotheosis of your Inquisition." My boss covered his forehead with his right hand, and started squeezing the air with his left hand. He was grinding his teeth and asked me, "Why the fuck would you put them in the freezer? Of all places? You are sick in the head." I swallowed suddenly and became nervous about getting hit again. I carefully answered him saying, "Look, sir, my shelf was full. There's writing on it that says capacity 20 and 20 napkins we're currently occupying it. And you know very well that I can't put the case files on the fridge's roof because the saying goes, the case gets shelved. There's no saying that says that a case gets roofed. My boss just shook his head violently in disappointment. He just quickly uttered, "I don't follow you." And I seriously cannot tell you how happy I was. How big my smile was, it was huge. I looked at him and almost cried to say, "Oh, thank you so much, sir. I don't like being watched." And with that, I walked away. I felt such a relief to find out that I wasn't being followed and watched. I walked all the way out of the building to my car in the parking lot. My boss ran in front of me and said, hello? Why did you walk away? We were in the middle of talking?" I was perplexed. I told him, "Well, Jess, you said you don't follow me and here you are contradicting yourself." He quickly blurts out, "That's an expression that means I don't understand your shitty logic. Now I'm going to get straight to the point. Here's the warrant for the arrest of our prime suspect. His name is Dipofishwasp. Find his ass, we are all on the hunt." Unfortunately for the rest of humanity and all living organisms, I found him first. I decided to interrogate him. My way. I was driving him to my surprise spot. He was very cocky. He chuckled and said, "Hey. No shit, are you that Yootipopper guy that fucked up the newspaper suicide?" I turned up the intensity a couple notches. I angrily told him, as a matter of opinion, "Yes, I am. I would shut the hell up if I were you. By the way, you're our number one suspect, Mr. Fishwasp." He shut his mouth very fast and looked out the window. We finally arrived to my surprise spot. I took him out of the car, lead him inside. No handcuffs, no search. I had an epiphany of sorts. We went to another sandwich shop. So we sat down together. I ordered some food and a drink. We were there for at least an hour. I waited patiently for him to incriminate himself. But did he? No. He did no such thing. I was relieved. This meant that my suspicion was correct all along. Sami's cauldron was the culprit. For those of you who don't understand my logic, allow me to explain. I went to Harvard. I graduated with honors at the tip-top of my class. I was adept in the studies of logic, critical thinking and deductive reasoning. What I did was I tested him. I never asked him a single question. Are you alarmed? Well, you shouldn't be, because my plan worked. So here we were at a sandwich shop, and Dipofishwasp never once ordered a sandwich to eat. Not even one crumb. This told me everything I needed to know because for one, it was lunchtime, he had to be hungry. Secondly, I knew for a concrete fact that I can back up with empirical extensive evidence that the killer liked sandwiches. And last but also certainly not the least, the real killer also robbed the other sandwich shop, so I know the real killer could afford it. None of these events took place. I was feeling great knowing that I didn't let an innocent man go to jail. Unless they had worked for the IRS, then I wouldn't mind. But that feeling didn't last long. As soon as he walked out of the door, my boss called to ask if I had arrested him. He reminded me that we had a warrant for his arrest. I lied to my boss and told him he just escaped. Luckily he did not know about the friendly interrogation that just occurred. So when I got outside I watched him run and tried to catch up, but I failed. He was pissed off when he got me on the phone. He yelled in my ear saying, "What the fuck? You were aiding and abetting a criminal?" I yelled right back, "No, I did not, boss." "Hell no." He ran and I couldn't catch up. My boss hollered in my ear even louder, screaming, "Shut it. I have undercover officers that have been following Dipofishwasp for days now. I had you arrest him so that the undercover wouldn't be discovered. Why did you let him go? The officers watching told me you hesitated." I balled up my fist and squealed, "I don't give a falling fuck what you think." I followed my Harvard textbooks to a T. It clearly said in plain English what to do. It said to make sure that the suspect is never one step ahead of you. So, I made sure he was about 10 steps ahead of me and then I ran after him. He was too fast. I didn't see you running. He hung up and texted me, "My office now." As soon as I showed up, he threw me into the interrogation room. He winked to me saying, "Okay. This is seriously your last shot. The other officers want to arrest you right now, but I have a lot of pull in my years of the force. So, they trust my judgment. I've tried on everyone's glasses in here to make sure I read your transcript correctly, and astonishingly you really are a Harvard Honors graduate. This is your last chance, to prove to me that you're a detective. What is your plan?" I had a cringe-worthy plan that I thought was gold at the time. I casually started telling my boss, "Ahem. I have the perfect plan, sir, no need to arrest me. It has absolutely no chance of failure. My plan is to wait until the real killer strikes again. When he kills once more then I catch him. How awesome is that? See, basically I will get twice the credit. 200% of achievement. Not only that, but morally speaking I will have a great conscience. Why? Because 2 families' lives whom have been ruined forever will now have justice. I mean seriously, 2 entire families will say, "Thank you so much Detective Yootipopper. It's going to be spectacular." My boss screamed at the top of his lungs, "I hope you die in prison, you fucking ringworm. Officers, take this punk to the precinct." The police came in and arrested me. I asked the officer during the Miranda rights process a question, "How did the priest sinct? And wouldn't it be pronounced sunct or sanct?" The officer said, "No, the precinct." I looked back at him and said, "Yeah, I get it, but that's really sad. Like, was it holy water or something? How could a priest sink? That's such a random phenomenon." The officer never bothered to correctly explain what my ears misheard. My cellmate helped me figure it out at least. World's Worst Murder Detective. By Adam Stark. Chapter 5. Philosophy. I found myself in the weirdest battle of all time. It was me against my boss. We each got a team of lawyers at the same time, go to charge each other with the same crime. Conspiracy to assist murderous criminals. His was against me for my incriminating statement about waiting for the killer to strike again. Mine was against him for the reason that I believe Sami's cauldron was still the killer. Take a guess. I lost. I ended up in prison. One detective from my old office felt bad and told me the outcome of the case. My boss was right, Dippo Fish Wasp did it. I'll never forget how he worded it, "Powen, you're a horrible despicable creature, and you don't deserve to know." But, Dippo was the killer. Forensic evidence was piling up on him big time. He won't go to trial, he committed suicide. I guess he went to the roof and rumors that he jumped off, allegedly. I was stunned. I thought that's so fucking strange. I told my cellmate, "Isn't that really strange? Do you think that makes any sense?" He said he jumped off the roof to kill himself by jumping off the ledge gently. Gently? If you decide to kill yourself by jumping off of a ledge, go for speed. Don't do it gently like a cream puff. I would go fast and make a cannonball-like figure to gain speed and momentum. My cellmate once again kindly explained to me what I misheard. I never heard of the word allegedly in my life. I thought he said allege gently. Anyways, I got out of jail and sent to prison. You wouldn't think that I would feel at home there, but I did. Oh, it was fun. I had a blast playing detective. What I did was I would buy things in the prison store to solve new cases. Prison cases, that is. I developed a way to dust fingerprints of inmates and I showed everyone how to do it. We had so much fun. We played this one game all the time. Someone would get knocked out, and I would fingerprint people until we found out who did it. It was a betting game. We bet a lot of cigarettes. So do you want to know how ungrateful the prison staff was? This one time I bet all of my cigarettes, my entire stash of them. I rigged the game because I was the one who actually assaulted the victim this time. Everyone else bet on other inmates and I bet on myself. The odds were heavily against my favor in a huge ratio difference. Since I did the fingerprinting and showed them that I won, I got a hold of a lot of cigarettes. Everyone was pissed off at me. What I thought was truly nothing less than indulgence by the prison staff was how they handled this debacle. They actually placed me in solitary confinement. I mean, what in the world? I took the time to solve the case of assault for them, which saved them time. I did them a favor. You'd think they'd appreciate that? But no, they did not. Then someone flushed all of my cigarettes down the toilet. A few hours later someone dumped my mattress down in the garbage dump. I had withdrawals and a horrible time sleeping. I had to be the luckiest man in the world. A lawyer came to see me. He was a very nice fella. I knew I could trust him because he wasn't from Harvard. He said that he could make us a lot of money for injustice and get me out of prison. We made a deal. The deal was that I got to say my statement in court first. I didn't even ask him for any details about what injustice had occurred against me. But I was so excited to get some things off my chest. When we arrived to the court, the judge entered the room and a bailiff said, "All rise." We all stood up. He said to proceed. My lawyer started sweating since he knew that I was about to get way off topic, but he wanted his 80% split, so he agreed to let me make my statement first. I paced back and forth and said everything that I wanted to say in that courtroom. It went like this: members of the court, ladies and gentlemen and other. This is going to be a political discourse, so put your thinking caps off. I must not allow this madness to proliferate any further. I feel as though we have been battered with centrifugal force for too long. In conclusion, I lost my mattress. Who would want to stop my ability to sleep? It was ironic that I haven't been able to sleep. Or actually not ironic at all, because I have no mattress. Then someone flushed all of my cigarettes down the toilet. With my addiction supplements flushed away, and my ability to sleep thwarted. In solitary I now suffer from sleep and sensory deprivation. Now I will be unable to do my job of investigation work. And if I, Powen Yootipopper, cannot investigate these crimes here, then an outside entity is going to be hired to fix the problem. Once that happens, it's going to defraud all of the prison programs. There's going to be staff cuts. There's going to be major problems in reimbursement in equitable upper echelons of the government for acting so coquettish with dangerous establishments, as well as being parsimonious with funds. Therefore, the aforementioned cogent points I bestowed using my wit via my sesquipedalian nature of using highfalutin language, and the steps incongruous with a rudimentary understanding of private practice rules, and philosophical prowess. This must galvanize support from the masses before reaching the apex of yet another abysmal failure in terms of conjecture. Inevitably, inexorably leading us one step closer to communism and gluten-free oxygen. I had to get that off of my chest. The second that I stopped talking, my lawyer screamed, "I object." The judge looked at my lawyer and said, You're objecting to your own client?" My lawyer scratched the back of his neck and told the room, "Yes. Please disregard everything my client said. Now let's look at the evidence, Your Honor." At the moment everything made perfect sense. You know what injustice it was that made us extremely rich? The letter I received from the FBI was the answer. That letter that insulted me was actually signed by the head of the entire FBI of all people. My lawyer found this and couldn't believe that nobody jumped at the opportunity. My lawyer successfully charged them with misuse of authority, illegal allocation of funds, harassment and cyberbullying. We made a ton of money. I had enough money to get out of prison. My life was now looking in another direction. I was inspired by my lawyer's work and I decided to give that a try. It's half detective work anyhow to me. I found the perfect first case to make a fortune. The famous lawyers make a fortune, and that's what I wanted to do, even though I was already rich. This man was desperately seeking a lawyer. He offered a huge price if any lawyer could get him off free of charges. His name was Putrik Jelpinsk. He was a chef, with a clean record. The charge against him was that he was stealing patented recipes from others. I went to work, I got down to business. I was the only lawyer willing to accept his case, and I found out why. Unfortunately, this looked to be an obvious open-shut case. The evidence was damning against him. I had a plan in motion. I went to his house, we had a very long discussion. I took very detailed notes and photos in my logs. I was nervous, but I had everything ready to take this case to trial, so I could win my first trial as a lawyer. Oh, and make even more money, of course. At the trial we stood together and I told him to go on the stand. I started out extremely strong from the gate. I made that jury my bitch. I asked Putrik Jelpinsk, "I'm going to remind you, sir, that you are under oath. You are a career chef, nobody here is going to dispute that. So please tell the jury something. As a chef for many years, have you even been involved in an oil spill scandal or been arrested for panhandling charges?" The judge looked extremely embarrassed. He knew my question made zero bit of sense. Putrik answered in an overly serious tone of voice, "Absolutely not, I have a perfectly clean record." I turned around to look at the jury and the other lawyer. I explained, "You see everybody, does that sound like a criminal chef to you? Not to me. Now I am going to move on to my next evidence. This is going to be controversial. I have evidence that will prove to the jury that he does not exist." The other lawyer was laughing and covering her mouth. I looked at the jury and pulled my log out. I said, "Exhibit A. I have a security camera footage of a big important NFL game. Notice here. The ticket store is closing. Do you see Putrik? He is holding cash in his hands while waving it in the air. The ticket store was closing because they sold out. But what company do you know that wouldn't try to haggle a deal for a paying customer? He must not really exist, is your answer. Next. Take a look at these photos, these are time-stamped and you can see the EXIF metadata to prove their validity. I had my client try the product called SlimFast to lose weight. Do you see the aftermath? He actually got bigger and gained weight. I fed him 10 of them for breakfast. How in the world would this product work on so many customers, but not him? Because he doesn't exist, is your answer. Next, watch this video please. And stop laughing. Anyways, see what he's doing here and observe what transpired as I have. He gives his cat food. What does that cat do? He talks to it, and it does not give him any attention at all, whatsoever. Here are records of the cat's veterinarian visits, and do you notice something peculiar? The cat is not deaf and not blind. So why in the world could it not notice its owner Putrik while it's walking to the tuna dish? Occam's razor is your friend, it means the simplest answer is the solution. He doesn't exist. Next, please take a close look at every single public picture of him that there is on the internet. See anything unusual? And stop laughing, we're in court. Anyways, notice what all of these pictures have in common, no smile. That's right. Not one smile in any of the public pictures of him. How is this possible if he does exist? Human emotions are applicable to the real and to the living. Yet, he doesn't smile. Not one smile in any picture ever taken of him. That I provided. The next evidence I will present is something relatable to everyone here. We've all heard the saying, "Don't look directly at the sun" before. Here is a video of Putrik looking directly at the sun without the benefit of protection. Notice something? He is squinting slightly, but notice, not once does he bleed. Not one drop of blood. Oh, so everyone else is in danger of the sun hurting their eyes, but the laws of physics and science don't apply to him? Nonsense. Rubbish. It's because he doesn't exist. The next evidence I'm presenting to you is also relatable to all of you. Here's another video. Here he goes into this store in a rural area. Can you folks read the sign on the wall in that store? Let the record show that it says quote no shirts, no shoes, no service on it. Now look at him trying to use his cell phone. Notice I get a close-up with my camera on his phone's screen. See that? His phone has no service. Not one bar of phone reception service. And he followed the sign's directions perfectly. He was wearing a shirt and shoes. Even pants. And yet, no service for him, or I mean his phone. How messed up is that? Clearly the implication here is that he had no phone service because he doesn't exist. Now, for my final piece of evidence. I noticed a picture he took of the outside view of his home when he moved in a few months ago. Do you see that sign? It's the city and population sign. It says the population is 49,682. Look at the timestamp. Not look at this picture I just took of that sign, yesterday. It says the exact same population. How? This is blasphemy. If he had really existed, the population number would have gone up by 1. But it didn't. That's all I have to show you, proof after proof that he doesn't exist, and therefore he couldn't have committed the crime he is being charged with. He never was involved in any nefarious activities whatsoever. The room was so silent. It was like I was talking to the damn wall and the wall was sleeping. The judge banged his hammer and yelled, "Order." So I immediately thought that this meant it was over for me. I thought he was about to wring my neck. But no. In my utter astonishment, he was yelling at the other lawyer. I couldn't believe it. The lawyer lady kept on laughing. She seriously wasn't showing any signs of stopping. I had made her laugh uncontrollably. At first it made me really mad. Not too much longer as the laughter continued. The judge gave her the third and final warning. She failed. Yes, it was amazing. The bailiff took her out of the courtroom as she kept laughing. The judge had no choice but to give us the victory. The defense failed miserably because basically I was unintentionally awful to the point of being funny. We actually won our case together on a technicality. I was very happy. I started to cry. I hugged Mr. Jelpinski and he thanked me. A few days later I called him asking for my money, and I guess my luck was still horrible. He found out that there is a problem with my defense. If he doesn't exist, and we won our case, then he should be viewed as such. That meant that he found a loophole to prevent him from paying me. Yeah, that's just how shitty victory feels. You win and get no prize. He didn't have to pay me because I had won the case proving he wasn't in existence. Fucking hogshit. If I was a criminal like him, I would forge a bunch of checks with his name on, and send those checks to racist, terrorist, and dangerous organizations in our country. Mainly the IRS. But I let it go. The end. Oh, okay, fine. You people really wanna know, huh? You heard my story, but that isn't enough to fulfill your curiosity, is it? You wanted to stuff that shit, didn't you? Fine, I'll tell you why I'm broke now. I will tell you how I lost all of my money. Since that's all you care about. I was going for a walk one afternoon. I happened to see a man on the roof of a big house. He made these strange gestures. I was extremely scared for his safety, that he may be trying to jump off and kill himself. I used a lot of money to hire a church choir. I called the police in 5 districts. I called the SWAT team. I called some other music bands and a food catering service. Yes, I did all of that, because I care. I didn't want him to jump. Once the police checked him out with their loudspeaker, they realized what really happened. I made another expensive mistake. He wasn't a suicidal guy getting ready to jump. He was a construction worker who was repairing a roof. Very embarrassing, and expensive as all hell. I will end my story with a quote from the news anchor who talked about what I did that day. Powen Yootipopper made a phone call to help prevent a jumper this afternoon, the somber facts tell us. But he was simply a construction worker doing his job. His heart was in the right place, but not his common sense. According to some doctors who were watching this unfold and seeing Powen's work as a public defender, They believe he may have a brainstem dysfunction.